This weekend's going to be monumental for the class of 2025 Tennessee football recruiting. Why is that? And who is going to be on campus for the 865 Live event? Some more Tennessee football recruiting talk and the implications that this weekend can have for Tennessee football here on a Friday. Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome into a Friday edition of Locked On Vols. I'm your host, Eric Kane. Can't thank you enough for being here, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. Got a fun show coming up today. Really looking forward to catching up with my colleague, Matt Ray, over at VolQuest.com. He's going to tell us all about, just like Austin did a little bit, from a different angle, Tennessee recruiting, how this 2025 class is shaping up, all about Tennessee's commit offensive lineman, Anthony Okmoro from earlier this week, and what's to come for the 865 Live event. Huge recruiting event coming up this weekend on the campus of the University of Tennessee. That's coming up here in segments 1 and 2. Plenty of Tennessee recruiting talk with Matt Ray, and then I'll get you caught up on what's been going on Tennessee baseball action from Hoover down in the SEC tournament. So it's going to be a fun Field Friday edition of Locked On Vols, and I'm happy to have you along for the ride. You can watch us, listen to us, subscribe to us, download us, all that for free wherever you get your podcast. So without further ado, let's check it in with Matt Ray of VolQuest.com. So I had Austin Price on yesterday's show, and another one of my colleagues, Matt Ray, who covers recruiting over at VolQuest.com, going to join us here today. Matt, Tennessee picked up a 2025 offensive lineman, the first offensive lineman of the class, in Anthony Okmoro. Tell me a little bit about his game. What did Tennessee like about Anthony that wanted to go ahead and, have him jump in this class?
I think there's plenty to like about him, Eric. Mainly the fact he hasn't played a ton of football. He's a massive human being with a basketball background, really natural footwork, really good at the, second level. And there's so many things that you can refine with his game. I think Tennessee just honed in on him. That's why you saw a lot of these long-term developers like Bedenbow at, Oklahoma, North Carolina was in there, Oklahoma State was in there. This is a guy that 2 to 3 years down the line in your program is going to be a valuable piece on the interior of the offensive line. High IQ guy. They can play all three positions on the interior. And then if you had to in a pinch, he's 6'4". He can kick out and play tackle. He doesn't have the longest arms in the world, but just a versatile offensive lineman. I think that's really what it came down to for Tennessee about Anthony Okmoro.
Well, obviously, it looks like I'm recording from a cave. I'm in a hotel room on the road. I've been on the road a lot here lately during baseball season. So I've been dialed out just a smidge in terms of recruiting. So tell me if I'm way off base here, but it does feel like, Matt, that this recruitment kind of ran under the radar a little bit. He came in for an official visit in May, and I know the emphasis is always about offensive tackle, and he's an interior guy. But is it fair to say that his recruitment kind of flew under the radar?
It really did, Eric. A lot of these schools that he focused in on as finalists really offered him around the, start of winter, even into early spring right there. Oklahoma, who in our opinion finished as runner-up, they didn't offer him till March 15th. He's an Oklahoma kid. He had moved from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Oklahoma. But he was an Oklahoma kid. They managed to quickly get him to campus for a, official visit for their spring game. And I think many had already penciled him into that class. Tennessee managed to just continue working there, and they got out and saw him. And, after his official visit here, and they were just able to compound that momentum into a win. And let me tell you, Oklahoma swung really hard at this kid. And Bedenbow is an elite developer of offensive line talent when you look at what they've done over time at Oklahoma. He stayed through multiple staffs now, and there's a reason for that. He's had guys that have protected 3 Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks over time. And, I think when you look at Anthony Okmoro, it's kind of a testament to how much he was wanted by Oklahoma, just given the fact that Bedenbow went into Elgin High School the day before his commitment, trying to make up ground, spent multiple hours there with Anthony and his family, and Oklahoma swung really hard in this one to try to land him. So overall, a very good win for Glenn Ellerby and company. And like you said, Eric, a recruitment that somewhat ran under the radar. The reason for the expedited timeline is he's planning to get back home to where he's from and represent on a national team there for a little bit. So he's not going to be able to go through some of the things in June that a lot of these other folks would be able to go through and then try to sit down and process a decision. He wanted to get it out of the way.
Yeah, and again, as we spoke on with Austin yesterday, he's not an Oklahoma kid. That's where he lives right now, but he's really only been
Yeah.
there since I want to say this semester. Spent some time
Yeah,
in North
January.
Carolina. Yeah. Austin and I spoke about Nick Moore, Jefferson County product they offered by Tennessee a couple weeks ago, and of course his head coach is Spencer Riley, and we'll be paying attention to that one. All the conversation about offensive tackles, but give me some more interior options, because it sounds like Tennessee wants to take 5 or 6 offensive linemen in this class, and Ogmoro is just the first one.
Yeah, and Nick Moore will be at 865 Live this weekend, and that's a good starting ground for Tennessee. I think pretty much everybody that you see through Tennessee's campus this weekend will be a take, and it's a pretty loaded 2025 visitors list. Maybe a couple of 2026s in town, but this is a good starting point for Tennessee with Nick Moore. As Glenn Elliott got out on the road, evaluated him, and I think Tennessee really likes Nick Moore and expect them to make a good push there. Dontrell Glover's a guy that Tennessee's still swinging at from down in Georgia. He just released his top 4. There's still a little ways to go in that recruitment. He's kind of been all over the map, I would say. He had publicly announced that Florida State was his leader at one point early in the spring. But the more you talk to people behind the scenes after a visit to Auburn, the Tigers kind of surge. Georgia's in this thing, but the more you talk to some folks, is he really a Georgia guy in terms of just kind of what he brings? He's not a massive offensive lineman. Probably had to play center for them, to kind of fit what they want to do in their scheme, whereas some of these other schools, Auburn, Tennessee more specifically, you don't have to be that 360-pound guy to move around and do what they want to do inside of their offense. So Tennessee's got good relationship there. He's tight with Kevin Pendleton, Glenn Ellerby. Max Thurman coached some of his family at some point. So Tennessee has, some connections there with him, and they'll get him back to campus in June for an official visit, as they continue to swing at him. And then, across the board, it really does still kind of come down to the tackles for me, Eric. I mean, Jalen Matthews, David Sanders, Josh Petty. Now, Josh Petty's interesting to me. I think Josh Petty's a tackle long term, but I think very early in his career, Josh Petty is so athletic that he can definitely play some interior just to get on the field earlier on. So that's a guy that, again, versatility, can do a lot of different things. One Gaston, where does he project long term? You have to suggest tackle, but man, if you want to plug and play him as a guard, at least for a year if you needed to, while he continues to develop in certain areas, he could definitely plug and play as a guard. Just a freakish human being in terms of just sheer size. So Tennessee's still in on a lot of really good offensive linemen down the stretch.
Yeah, and it just feels like, we're such a unique era in college football and college athletics in general, in name, image, and likeness, talking about revenue sharing coming up, transfer portal. And maybe it's always been like this to an extent, but it really feels like, it's not like you're lying to the guys, but it's like, you got to lead in with the offensive tackle vision, because again, that these kids know that's where you make money at the next level, and say, okay, well, you can play guard for a year or two, but maybe you can play tackle down the line, or have the opportunity to play tackle down the line. Is that kind of a strategy for Glenn Ellerby and some of these offensive line coaches, kind of lead with the tackle conversation? They kind of say, well, if we get you here, man, you could maybe play guard early on. It feels like that's been more and more the conversation lately.
Yeah, I think it has to be, and I think more so over time, these kids are getting used to it. I mean, There's some kids, they're no doubters. They're no doubt that they're going to be a tackle in college and they're going to be a tackle in the league. There's some kids that, hey, they may go play tackle for 2 years in college, depending on the situation, but they're never going to be a tackle in the league, right? They're always going to end up kicking. And so I think overall, it resonates with a lot of these kids. They, appreciate the transparency, and I think we're seeing more and more of that. And I'll say this, there has not just been a ton of true tackle bodies in the last 3 or 4 recruiting classes. Looking back, it's like, man, there are some guys that are no doubters, but it's been tough to find those true top 10 NFL, picks. And even when you look back at the draft, some of those guys haven't been that highly rated over time. They've been developed and they've gotten there. So it is very interesting in terms of that.
We got another segment coming up with Matt Ray. He's going to tell us who the headliners are going to be for 865 Live. It's one of the probably the premier recruiting weekend on the calendar for Tennessee each and every year. That's coming up, plus a little offseason chatter. More with Matt Ray of VolQuest.com. Coming up next as we continue on here with a Friday edition of your Locked On Vols. want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It is winner take all time in the NBA, in the NHL. Playoff time is happening right now, and FanDuel is giving you the shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Again, that is $150 to bet on spreads, on money lines, on player props, and so much more. You can visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn, put in that promo code LockedOn, and you can make every playoff shot count. Plus, Major League Baseball is in full swing right now, and you guys know, and I've talked to some of you guys off the air a little bit about how I like to dabble in the NASCAR a little bit every single weekend. There's so many different individual player props out there that is so much fun. Car, make, model, team, evens, odds, top tens, restarts, all that type of stuff in the NASCAR realm. You can find that and more. Baseball, NBA, NHL playoff time, all that and more. It's over at FanDuel.com. Again, FanDuel.com/LockedOn to make your shot a winning goal. FanDuel, it is America's #1 sports book. All right, welcome back in. Matt Ray here on your Friday edition of Locked On Vols. I am Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys for making this your first listen and your first watch each and every day. A premier recruiting event happening this weekend on the campus of the University of Tennessee. It is called the 865 Live. You mentioned a couple of names already that's going to be headlining it, but who are some of those 5 highly ranked 4-stars, and more than anything, some of those guys that Tennessee views as absolute priorities who are going to be on campus leading off this weekend?
Yeah, Eric. I mean, I think when you look back all the way to, January, right? Snowstorm comes through. Tennessee's supposed to have a big junior day there. It doesn't pan out. Like, how is this going to impact Tennessee in recruiting? It didn't have a ton of impact, but they struggled for a little bit to try to get some of those guys to campus. They were able to do so at different times over the spring, but this visit weekend on paper is as impressive as any visit weekend on paper that I can remember for Tennessee. Starting with David Sanders and Jaime Ffench, the 2 5-stars. David Sanders back for the 3rd time in basically 6 weeks here, and then we'll be back in June. You got Jaime Ffench here, around mid-spring right there, end of March, 1st of April. A big deal to get him back in town before a June official visit. And then George MacIntyre is back in town to spend time working on those 2 and recruiting them. Now, when I talked to George MacIntyre on Thursday, just kind of seeing where things were with him. Are you going to be in this weekend? Well, he wasn't planning to be in until he started to see this list fill out. He was in Mobile, Alabama training, and he booked a ticket to get on a flight to Knoxville. And he is that dedicated to this class that he wants to be there. So he'll get into town on Saturday before the 865 Live event starts up, and he'll make his way over to campus. And he's going to be in the ear of those guys. Those 2 specifically are obviously the headliners. But then when you start looking down, like I said, we already mentioned Nick Moore. On the defensive side of football, it's got a chance to be really impressive. One guy in Tennessee wasn't sure they were going to be able to get into town was Jared Smith. He's a high priority edge rusher for several of these schools. He's told Chad Simmons that he will be in town this weekend. Duke Johnson is a 4-star Alabama commit that William Inge was in over the spring to see. He's planning to be in this weekend. That's a big deal as Tennessee's working to get him back in at the end of June. They're one of several schools trying to flip him. Honest Conanbanny, a very lone cornerback out of South Carolina that Tennessee's liked for some time. He OVs in June. He's back now just 2 weeks before that OV. Tim Merritt out of Alabama, probably the number 1 or number 2 guy on the safety board for Tim Banks in this class. He's going to be here. He's got a June OV as Tennessee's battling to pull him out of Alabama, with Auburn and Alabama both pretty heavily involved there. Overall, this weekend, it just shapes up to where you have a core group of commits here that have been pretty vocal, that are pretty routinely around campus, and they're going to be here around some of these top priorities. A guy I shouldn't leave off is Shakai Mills-Knight, the Baylor school running back. I think Tennessee's done a really nice job there. That recruitment, the rubber's going to meet the road in that recruitment at some point, as AP would say. And for him, I think this is a big visit. He's had a good relationship with Darrell Sims for some time now. They knew each other before Sims got to Tennessee. But Shakai got up here at the 1st of April. It was his first chance looking at Tennessee. It impressed him. He got him on paper for an official visit. He'll be here on June 14th. He's going to be back. He's going to see a more laid-back environment. He told me in person a couple of weeks ago how big culture was for him. And I think one thing that we know from these events is Josh Heupel and his staff, that culture is on full display at 865 Live. It's laid back. It's having fun. It's team building stuff. And I think that's going to be very important for Shakai Mills-Knight. Given the fact that he's going to be back again in about 2 weeks, it's going to be in the middle of a whirlwind of visits. He's taken like 6 visits in 21 days. But when he comes back to Tennessee in 2 weeks, his mom will be able to accompany him. He's originally from Canada. He's playing ball at Baylor. She's still in Canada, so she will have a chance to accompany him. She's not going on every official visit. So that's a big deal for Tennessee. He's going to be able to go home, tell her about some of these things again, and then she's finally going to get to come down and experience. And it's going to be a lot of freshness for Tennessee in terms of that. So that's just some of the names that are going to be here. It's going to be a very big weekend for Tennessee.
Yeah, we'll see if all those names make it in. Of course, there's always some guys that don't come in every single weekend, whether it's in the fall or in the summer or whatever. And you were talking about how like it's kind of laid back, kind of team building stuff. There's also a little bit of competition in there, and it's really funny to see some of these guys in their competitive spirits, come out in the scavenger hunt or something. This kind of works in conjunction for some guys. Not everybody receives an invitation, but you got the On3 Elite Series going on, the second annual one in Nashville, first of next week. And some of these guys are going to be maybe making their way to Nashville, stopping by this weekend in Knoxville, or it kind of really works out really well for Tennessee that the On3 Elite Series is happening the first of next week.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, I think when you look at it, a guy that I left off that list that's as important as anybody is Isaiah Gibson out of Warner Robins. Tennessee's really making strides for the USC commitment, a top 50 edge rusher. He was on campus earlier in the spring. Less than a month ago, basically. He'll be back again, and Tennessee's working to get a June official visit with him. But he's coming up from Warner Robins. He told me the plan is to be here this weekend. Now, does he get into town on Saturday? If he does, are you really driving back to Warner Robins and then going back to the On3 Elite Series, or does your visit kind of linger over? Do you take the time to check out what's going on in Knoxville and learn a little bit more about a school that you're really deep diving into right now? And I have the same question for a David Sanders, right? They're coming down from Charlotte. I would expect them to get into town probably on Friday night at some point, Friday evening at some point, staying through 865 Live on Saturday evening. Does he just hang out for a day or so and then make his way over to Nashville? It really does work in Tennessee's favor, like you said, Eric. So I think that at least adds something into it. We'll see kind of where that goes. But I think overall for Tennessee this weekend, as you said, these guys have to make it in. But right now, it seems like there's a high probability that you're going to get probably at least about 90% of the expected list here. So that's, again, a star-studded weekend for Tennessee.
Yeah, that's huge. Talking a lot of recruiting here the last 3 days here on the show, and I know the YouTube audience loves it for sure. I asked this to Austin yesterday, and I'm going to ask it to you, and I think there's a difference here. The casual fan is just going to say, oh, they finished 12th in recruiting. Okay, well, that's not bad, but 7th in the SEC, or, what's it going to take to have a top 5 class? And sure, you want that, but also there are guys like Radarius Jackson and guys like Joe Kim Dotson that this staff valued and needed to be a part of this class. I know that they've risen some, but might not be those, top 50 top guys. But then there are some, the David Sanders and, of course, George MacIntyre you've already gotten in there. What's it going to take, though, for Tennessee to be in that upper echelon in the SEC when it comes to the final recruiting rankings? What needs to happen in this class moving forward? Of course, you got to get David Sanders and some of those big body guys to have one of the better classes in the SEC, maybe 4 or 5, to where you're finishing 8th or 9th in the country, but you're 4 or 5 in the SEC. That's a little bit better than where you've been.
Yeah, because I think, when you get to 4 or 5 in the SEC, then you're really splitting hairs between, 3 to 5, right? So overall, I think you look at a guy like Radarius Jackson as the example, right? Charles Power, really high on Radarius Jackson. Was on him before anybody, ranked him as a 4-star before anybody. He's climbing in the top 100. I would not be shocked to see Radarius Jackson closer to the top 50 at some point.
Okay.
I think you let off with it, though. You have to land a guy like David Sanders in this class. David Sanders is going to be a consensus, probably top 5 prospect until the end. That's a huge boost to any recruiting class. George MacIntyre, unless something goes wrong at Brentwood Academy this fall, will be a 5-star quarterback to end the class. There's just too much projection there with him, with the way the rankings go. I think, again, you need another top 75 to top 50 guy in that wide receiver ring. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Jaime Ffench, but if you can get a Travis Smith or a DeJarian Miller who's going to climb the rankings, probably finish inside the top 150, that helps boost your class. And then defensively, I think over time, that's what makes it harder for Tennessee to land that, go from 12 to 8, right? But I think when you look at some of the wins that they've had, the staff is as excited about those as any. And I'll give you a prime example in a guy like Ricky Gibson. Now, he eventually climbed the rankings. I can't remember exactly where Ricky ended, but Ricky was a 600, 650, 550, 650 type player when Tennessee honed in on him. Ricky Gibson went to Georgia and ran a 4.4, maybe a little lower, posted an insane vertical and had a huge broad jump, and all of a sudden Georgia was all over him. He camped down there. He impressed them. And about a week out of that decision, Ricky Gibson was ready to commit to Georgia. Now, if Ricky Gibson had committed to Georgia, who knows where his ranking goes, right?
Yeah.
It got him a bump just because the Bulldogs were involved down to the stretch, and they do a great job of evaluating corners. But so has Tennessee so far. And you've got 2 guys in this class like Dylan Lewis and Tyler Redmond, who Tennessee feels as strongly about as anybody. In October, they were pushing to get those guys into the class. They prioritized them for weeks. And I talked to a lot of folks in and out of the state of Georgia throughout every week, and there is no cornerback deal in the state that is as physically gifted as those two when you kind of start talking to people. Now, there are pieces that go with it. There are things that have to come together. But from what those two have done from a production standpoint, from a physicality standpoint with how they've been playing and coached up at Milton, the ceiling is high for those guys, but they're not highly ranked guys. So if you're Tennessee and you're going to push for a class, you got to have some guys like that you trust early on get bumps, or you've eventually got to land some higher guys. Because when you look at some of these other classes, if you're Tennessee and you're only taking 24 to 25 guys and somebody else takes 28 and there's 3 more 4-stars, or borderline 4-stars, you're never going to overcome that. So I kind of think you just have to look at the class as a whole, look more toward where that class average is. It's really tough to get to that top 5 category right now. And Tennessee, regardless of what you say about the staff, is going to trust their evaluations.
Your stuff has always been good, Matt, but your presence, I can just tell you are so comfortable in front of the camera now, and that is almost night and day to where you were about a year or 2 years ago from now. So
it is. My stock's up, buddy.
Your stock is up.
My stock is up.
Awesome stuff there from Matt Ray. Matt, appreciate it as always, man. Look forward to reading all of your work and all of our work over there at VolQuest.com this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. Thank you, buddy.
All right, Matt Ray, my colleague over at VolQuest.com, does an awesome job. We'll come back and we'll discuss a little bit of baseball down here from Hoover and the SEC tournament. That is what you had to look forward to here to conclude a Friday edition of Locked On Vols. I want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the a procrastinator's perfect app, is what I'm trying to say. Why? Because you can buy tickets to sporting events. You can buy tickets to comedy events and theater events and concerts on this app called the Game Time app. And a lot of the times the tickets get cheaper the closer you get to the event. And you can even buy tickets on the Game Time app an hour after the event has started. Again, for sports, for comedy, for concerts, whatever the case is. You need to put in this promo code to do it, though. Locked On College. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase by downloading the Game Time app. Put in that promo code Locked On College. $20 off your first purchase. Locked On College, LOCKED, COLLEGE, for $20 off your first purchase. Flash deals, zone deals, all-in prices, seat views, so you know exactly what you're paying for before you're actually paying for it, right? And the lowest price guarantee, where Game Time, they're going to credit you 110% of the difference if you find a cheaper ticket somewhere else in the same section than the one that Game Time is offering you. So again, The procrastinator in you, I'm a procrastinator, and I use and I take advantage of the Game Time app. Put in that promo code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. More to come as we continue on here with this Friday edition of Locked On Vols. Stay tuned. We got a final segment left here of this Friday edition of Locked On Vols, and I want to talk a little baseball, little baseball from the SEC tournament down in Hoover, and how at the time of this recording, Tennessee is still alive. Now, it wasn't the prettiest open for Tennessee on Wednesday. The top seeded Volunteers took on number 8 seed Vanderbilt, who beat Florida the day before in the play-in round to get to the double elimination bracket. I'll be so glad next year when it's all single elimination down here in Hoover, because it's one of the more complicated brackets out there. But nonetheless, it was not very good. Tennessee took it on the chin, losing, I think, 13-4, 12-5, or something like that. Just wasn't good. I mean, Tennessee treated it like a bullpen game, or like a midweek game, because that's essentially what it was. Your midweek games happen on Tuesdays. You're in postseason play now. This game and this tournament took place on Wednesday. You know, your Xander Seacrest and Drew Beams and Stamos and Causey, I mean, they need to be on normal amounts of rest. And Tony Vitello and Frank Anderson weren't going to, try anything with regional games coming up, next week. And we spoke a little bit about this earlier in the week, and I'll continue to reiterate it. You're trying to go out there and win. You're a competitor, okay? You're trying to go out there and win every single game you play. But in the grand scheme of things, this means nothing for Tennessee. Because why? Well, you've locked up an 8 seed. You're the number 1 team in the country. You've been projected in some of the latest field as 64 projections by Baseball America as the top overall seed. What you do in Hoover this weekend means literally nothing. So you're not going to go out there and put your pitchers and their arms in jeopardy. You're not going to go out there and throw guys out there on the mound on short rest. You're going to go out there and try to make it work, but you're not going to do anything that's going to jeopardize your team next week when you're hosting a regional, and you lose that and your season's over. So Wednesday was kind of ugly, and I know a lot of fans from the outside are saying, oh, they threw the game, or they're not playing to win, or oh, Tony Vitello doesn't care. As he said numerous times, leading up to this SEC tournament, you're going to go out there and try to win. But me as a coach, or me as a staff, I'm speaking like I'm Tony Vitello right now, I'm going to go out there and try to check some boxes. Want to line my pitchers up. And so Nate Snead got the start and looked really good for a little bit, and then it went downhill in a hurry. And Tennessee threw out Marcus Phillips and Matthew Dallas and a bunch of Andrew Binky and Dylan Loy, and really just didn't go well for a lot of these guys. Just kind of one of those days. A.J. Russell did make his return to the mound, which was huge, and it was a little rocky start for him. He hit the first batter in the head that he faced. He gave up a single behind that, and then buckled down and sandwiched a pair of strikeouts around, I want to say a flyout, and was able to escape trouble. And that was great to see A.J. Russell get back out there and make his return. So that was kind of the highlight of Wednesday. But Tennessee lost by 9 runs and was facing elimination on Thursday. And Tennessee comes in, and you're at your normal starting rotation now, because they're on that rest, right? So Chris Stamos, your opener, your normal game 1 opener, pitched really, really well. Gave up a home run, but he pitched really, really well in 3 innings and a third, I believe, and then handed the ball to A.J. Causey. And A.J. Causey struck out 7, walked 1, went 4 innings and a third, and gave up 2 runs. I thought he looked really, really good, and they kind of gave it to Kirby to finish things off, and that saved the arms to have Aaron Combs available for Saturday. Of course, Drew Beams going to get the start Friday. Drew Beams going to get the start on Friday, and Aaron Combs is going to be available on Friday. And if you make it to Saturday, Xander Seacrest is going to have an opportunity to pitch, or maybe he'll even pitch on Friday, because more than anything, it's about making sure your guys get some work in and take advantage of this. It's kind of weird to say off week, but it kind of is what it is, right? This is not regular season. You don't have guaranteed games this weekend, but you're going to be hosting a regional and playoff action the following weekend. So the bats came alive. Kavares Steers had such a fantastic ball game on Thursday. Had an RBI double when Tennessee's offense was pretty quiet, and gave Tennessee a run of insurance that was certainly needed. And then later in the ball game, hit a 3-run home run that gave Tennessee a 4-run lead at 6-2, I believe. So Kavares Steers had a really, really nice ball game, and Tennessee was playing some inspired baseball there towards the end. So that was good. Tennessee now moves on. We'll play the nightcap on Friday, coming up tonight. At the time of this recording, I don't know who they're going to face, because there's a game on Thursday night, and the loser of Mississippi State and Vanderbilt will play Tennessee in yet another elimination game. If you win tonight on Friday, then you advance on to Saturday, and Saturday and Sunday are single elimination, the semifinals and championship games. So good work being done down in Hoover. I really, really enjoy this SEC tournament. I mean, just seeing I love college athletics, the pageantry, seeing all the different fan bases and all the chants and the chats. And I mean, it's not softball, don't get me wrong. I mean, unless you're Kentucky baseball, right? But just seeing some of the different quirks of all the different fan bases, and it's cool seeing all the tailgates out there. And I mean, it's a show. Hoover does such a great job, and I'm really, really happy to be here more than just a couple hours like I was in 2023. So we'll see what Tennessee looks like, how they stack up later tonight. Again, the nightcap somewhere around 7:30 Eastern. 3 o'clock Central is when the first game is, and then Tennessee will be the second game, and they'll have about 30 minutes, after that first game concludes. So we'll see what happens. But Tennessee did win a game, staying alive, and it's a much better showing than going 0-2 and going home, right? But it's been fun down here so far. Kavaris here is really starting to come into his own and kind of get that swing back, and that's been really good. A.J. Russell's pitched, and we'll get to see Beamer tonight. And, Tennessee's kind of, as Tony Vitello said in postgame, kind of checking those boxes. One thing that's interesting, though, just to show you how much this SEC tournament doesn't matter for top-seeded teams. Now, if you're on the bubble, it matters a lot. The top 4 seeds all lost on Wednesday. Tennessee lost. Kentucky lost. Arkansas lost. Technically, Arkansas was the second seed. Arkansas lost. Texas A&M lost. So 4 of the best teams in the country all lost on Wednesday. It's strength and testament to this league, and also to, Hagen Smith, SEC Pitcher of the Year, elimination game on Thursday. He threw 2 innings. Again, you got bigger fish to fry. You know what I'm saying? It's just about being smart, but you never want to lose to Vanderbilt, and you never want to lose in that fashion. So we'll see if Tennessee scores off against Vanderbilt or if it'll be Mississippi State, but I've got all the coverage down here from Hoover, and you can check it out over at volquest.com. Guys, appreciate you for being here today and listening to us, watching us here on Locked On Vols, making us your first listen, your first watch. Can't thank you enough, as always, for being an everydayer, and I can't wait to come back and start talking some Tennessee football and get you set for regionals and all that more on next week's Locked On Vols. Until then, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys. This is Locked On Vols.